What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with a solo podcast. We are going to do updated win-loss projections for every NBA team following the NBA in-season tournament. Congratulations to the Lakers on winning the inaugural NBA Cup and pocketing $500,000 per player. I'm sure that night out in Vegas was pretty fantastic. Before we get started, very quickly, if you haven't, please hit the subscribe button on YouTube, subscribe on Apple and Spotify. Ratings and reviews help us out a ton. And I would ask, share our episodes with people. Tell people about us to help us continue to grow the community. And join our Discord. The link to that's in the podcast and YouTube description. Continue the conversation there. I think we're nearing a milestone. If we get 10 more subscribers, maybe I'll do a special live episode in there or something. Or maybe we need 12. Or if we get 15 more people in Discord, I think we hit a membership milestone, and I'll do a live podcast, maybe a mailbag or something that I'll schedule around the Discord users. And finally, socials. Support us by buying our merch as well. That does it, though. Let's get into some updated win-loss projections for every NBA team. So let's start. Look at that. Authored by me. Updated win projections for every NBA team after the in-season tournament. What a great author. Really excited to go through this person's article. Atlanta Hawks 41-41. They're actually on a worse pace than this. And, you know, I don't think people are going to want to bump them up for the most part when you have watched them. I think that's fair. There have been some bright spots. The fact that they're fifth or in the top five of offense when Trae Young hasn't been shooting too well. DeJounte Murray's been really good as a scorer, even though his defense feels like it's regressed. And then Jalen Johnson, before the injury, was headlining the most improved player discussion. He was certainly among the primary names in there. When you just look at this team, though, I don't know how they get better as currently constructed. The only real bright spots on defense are they force turnovers, and they're not really fouling a lot relative to those turnovers. They're not a good defensive team. They don't have the personnel to be better. They're interested in Pascal Siakam. I like the offensive fit in Atlanta just fine, but if you're keeping Murray and Trae, you're adding another ball-dominant guy who's not been shooting well from three, and I don't know how much he actually improves your defense, whether you're using him at the 5, whether you're playing him next to Jalen Johnson, or you're trying to play him next to Okongwu or Capella. This team feels like it needs a trade, like kind of a mega trade that really nudges their defense in the right direction. The Boston Celtics, 60 wins, and this might be just a little too conservative because they're just a machine, and the offense can get a little sticky at points. There are nights when Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, even Jason Tatum go through this just wonky decision-making. They're just a defensive terror, though, when you look at how they're built to defend. There could be some injury issues here. Porzingis has already missed some time. Al Horford is 37, but the Celtics, even if you don't like the way their offense looks, this is a team that is elite at both ends of the floor, and they just have the space to kind of offset a lot of the playmaking deficits that they have. We'll see if this comes back to bite them in the playoffs, but for the regular season specifically, keeping them at 60 might almost just be too little, Like, they could easily win more than that. The Nets, I'm going to go with 43-39 here. I did not expect the offense to be this good. Lonnie Walker, the fourth, hitting a bunch of off-the-dribble jumpers before he gets injured. Cam Thomas has been lights out just from sort of those in-between ranges. Mikal Bridges has come along. Cameron Johnson's playing well. Dorian Finney-Smith is having one of his better offensive seasons. Spencer Dinwiddie, by the numbers, has been one of the best one-on-one scorers in the league, too. And I think because, you still look at them and it's, do they have enough playmaking? They have enough shot making, and they can run a bunch of these spacey lineups that are going to offset, similar to the Celtics, that are going to offset any playmaking deficit and help them in the half court. The question with them, ironically, is just how the defense holds up when you're going to rely on Lonnie Walker or Cam Thomas. Things could get dicey there. Nick Claxton missing a ton of time probably didn't help them. Now that he's back, we could see some normalization there. That being said, this is perhaps a team that needs to acquire some heft on the front line if it really wants to beef up its immediate window. And I wouldn't expect them to. They're kind of they're not necessarily in win now. They're more, and they're not in, let's see what we have here mode, but they're kind of in between. And so that's a solid spot to be relative to the pick equity they have moving forward if they want to make adjustments over the offseason. The Charlotte Hornets, 24-58. I had them higher, but the wins, they got to come from They got to come from somewhere in this exercise. And so you start after the initial run-throughs, and I think I mentioned this specifically with the Blazers when I get to them, you start pulling away from certain teams. And the Hornets were among the low-hanging fruit. LaMelo's injured right now, the same surgically repaired ankle that the same ankle he had surgically repaired, I think it was last March. The defense has been really bad. And Brandon Miller, relying on a rookie, has not really been a part of that. He's been one of their brighter spots defensively. Mark Williams looks overtaxed. I think this team eventually just gets to a point where, well, are the bodies available, but also are they going to kind of flip that switch, think more about the future, move Gordon Hayward, maybe move Terry Rozier. They're not a good basketball team anyway. If you told me that they don't make any moves and that LaMelo is going to, still make it to 60 games or something, I think you can bump up this win total, but I'm not about to do it. The team has just not impressed me. Speaking of teams that have not impressed me, the Bulls, I don't have any idea what to do with them. In Zach LaVine's first few games out, they've looked pluckier. They beat Milwaukee. They beat New Orleans. DeMar DeRozan was not available for that Milwaukee win either. There's real impact on the defensive end. They can still force turnovers when you're looking at Javon Carter, Ayo Dosunmu, Alex Caruso, of course. Even Patrick Williams has come along there. The Bulls, we know, are shopping LaVine. There's also been the report that a DeMar DeRozan trade is likely because the sides are so far apart in extension talks. I could see the Bulls, and this would bump up their win total, viewing Zach LaVine's absence and trying to move him for depth pieces or as part of not a consolidation trade, but a trade that gets them maybe two guys who are going to help them right away, and they're not prioritizing necessarily picks and prospects if they start to play really well without Zach LaVine. That's absolutely something this franchise would do. I still think that when we get to December 15th, maybe by January 15th, when a lot of other players can be traded, this team will finally, at long last, make some seismic selling moves well in advance of the trade deadline. I don't personally expect this to linger until February, although it could. The Cavs, I know a lot of people are down on the Cavs right now. Let's just see them get healthy. We haven't seen Mobley, Mitchell, Garland, Allen, and Strus log a ton of time together. I will admit the offense has been very wonky during those stretches. They're not taking enough threes. They're not making their above the break threes. Darius Garland really hasn't come on from the perimeter just yet. He's also committed a bunch of turnovers. He's looked off a lot. That dynamic with Mitchell and Garland, it's still just weird. And so is the dynamic between Allen and Mobley. It can be weird, inconsistent. They will do some big-to-big stuff, but probably not in high enough volume. I still look at this team, and as you get, Karis LeVert still working his way back from injury, and we've seen his performance slip from where it was pre-injury. Isaac Okoro dealing with injuries. I still think if you give this team time, they're going to be one of the most elite squads in the Eastern Conference, and that the offense will start to look a lot better with all five of their best players on the court. And you have to tip the cap to what Max Strus has done for this team, not just beyond the arc, but inside it. His movement, his playmaking, it's been big for them. Dallas, 45-37. This feels, I'm lowering them off their current pace, and we know the Kyrie injury isn't serious, which is great news for them. But they started out like gangbusters. They've kind of faded. Grant Williams is dealing with an injury. Maxi Kleber's barely played this season, and he remains incredibly important to kind of getting to or unlocking what should be some of their most important lineups. The defense is an issue here, and I don't know what to make of it. Derek Lively has played really well. The Mavs' rim protection is still shaky, particularly when he's off the floor. They are starting Derek Jones Jr., and he has played well. He's hitting his threes this season, but that starting unit's a net negative overall, because when you have Derek Jones Jr. on the court, defenses still don't care. They'll let him shoot 40+% on moderate volume if it means that they're going to be able to close in, pack the paint, throw more bodies at Kyrie and Luka Doncic. And so that group's half-court offensive rating is actually below average. And so this team just feels like they are still a player archetype or two away from contention, and those player archetypes are not on the roster to me. It feels like at least they need one real wing or more point of attack defender. Josh Green is injured right now, and he's been fairly disappointing as well. Still a very good team, but if you're asking me whether I think the Mavericks can win a playoff series if they get there, I'll never just say Luka can't do it, because Luka has had some spectacular performances in the playoffs, but they just still feel a significant player short is probably the best way to phrase it. More than one player, but it could be one significant player. The Nuggets, look, they can't beat the Rockets apparently, it's a little bit weird. They're chugging along. They're on pace for more than 50 victories. They do have, they're fourth in points allowed per possession against top 10 offenses. So that's a big deal this season. They have that defensive gear. Murray hasn't really been great this year. He's still coming back from that hamstring stuff. I expect him to be fine. Jokic is probably the favorite to win MVP as of now, even though he kind of turned in 2 non-Jokic games in a row. Aaron Gordon's three-point shooting is a problem, but you're getting really good minutes from Reggie Jackson. Christian Brown is starting to perk up. I think you've run into a good problem with Michael Porter Jr., where it feels like he whacks and wanes on offense more than he does with his rebounding and defense. And you know what? That's going to be just fine for this team. There's still things to harp on. The bench is basically a mess after you're Reggie Jackson and Christian Brown. But the fact that you're still able to get to a top 7 like you were last year, yes, you would prefer to have Bruce Brown over Reggie Jackson or maybe even Christian Brown in general. But you still run, it seems like, 7 trustworthy players deep, because I was wrong about Reggie Jackson, of course. It sure seems like so far. That's just, they're going to be fine. They might not finish with a 1 seed in the West. There are teams like the Thunder, like the Timberwolves, that will want to go for it more. This team is still really good, and I think you have to leave them as favorites in the Western Conference. They don't really have the ammo to make a trade if they did want to significantly deepen the rotation to get to an 8th or 9th guy, where, do we trust a big? Because how much can DeAndre Jordan actually play? Zeke Najee's not having a good year, and he's kind of already fallen out. And do we think that Julian Strother or Peyton Watson are just going to be ready by the playoffs? They don't really, unless they're looking to move off of one of their top 7 guys, they don't really have the ammo or the salary to go do something significant. But you look at their top 7, even if you want to say it's a top 6 because you count Brown and Jackson as one player or whatever, even with their flaws, the Nuggets are the toast of the West. There's just no reason to pretend otherwise. So the Pistons, 14 wins is 3 fewer than last year, and it might be a gift because they're currently embroiled in a losing streak that has them on track to have the worst record in NBA history. This team is a disaster right now. The Jaden Ivey stuff is officially awkward, verging on detrimental. Now you're dealing with the Jalen Duren injury. We've still seen a little bit too much. They're not staples, and now that Bojan Bogdanovic is back, they'll be even less of a staple. Fire the 2 big lineups into the sun, and that includes Isaiah Stewart. It's just, we're talking, yeah, he's shooting fine from 3. The volume is not that high. And so do you call him a stretch big? And part of being a stretch big is, can you attack closeouts? That's not something he's necessarily comfortable doing at the moment. Bogdanovic coming back opens up the floor for Cade Cunningham, and we started to see him play better before Bogdanovic even came back. That's a good sign. Ausar Thompson's been one of the most entertaining players to watch on defense in all of basketball. Jalen Duren was a delight before he went down with his injury. This team can be better. Monte Morris, he'll get healthier. That should help them as well. So everyone who's in a rush will trade Bogdanovic, trade Morris, trade Burks, just get what you could get for them. Maybe they go that route, but if you're not going to get a good first-round pick for Bogdanovic, you might as well just keep him, because your win total is going to be low enough that you have top lottery odds anyway, and his spacing, his scoring can streamline development for everyone else, and now you get to a point where, yeah, we're going 1 big and Bogdanovic, and now we have, maybe the spacing if Cade's hitting his 3s, depending on who else, and Marcus Sasser is going to be on the floor, but like, you can get 2 lineups where there are at least 2 to 3 positive shooters, and then you can mix and match with Cade Cunningham, Ausar Thompson, and hopefully Jaden Ivey at one point. I won't pretend that this season has been a success for the Pistons. It's an unmitigated disaster, and they need to get their shit together. Otherwise, Troy Reaver's not going to have a job this time next year, I would assume. The Warriors, 42-40, speaking of gifts, they're on pace to be below 500. I assume they'll get it together to some extent, but they're old. They're slow. They're unathletic. You can blame some things on Steve Kerr, but he's gotten away from some Moses Moody minutes, when it's mattered most at points. I don't know how this team is supposed to be a lot better than it is now. And it wouldn't be so frustrating if you're kind of just riding out the end of this dynastic era if Steph Curry wasn't a transformative player still. He can headline a contender. The Warriors just haven't put one around him. And you're at a point now where it needs to be a big trade to make it happen. And this does not really account for that because it is a new front office with Kirk Lacob and Mike Dunleavy in charge running the show. And they've shown they'll be aggressive with the Chris Paul trade specifically. Will they do it midseason? And will they make the call of, well, we're going to get rid of Kuminga here. We'll move 2 future first-round picks, and we'll go after a Pascal Siakam, or we'll try and get OG Anunoby. My point is you can't stand pat and hope to be in the middle. This team, it's the dynastic era. It's run out of lightning in a bottle stores. They got that when they won the title in 2022. It's not happening again. And everyone could say, well, we're waiting for Klay Thompson to be better. He'll be less disjointed on offense. The defense is not coming back. He's 33. He's 2 major injuries under his belt. And then there's the Andrew Wiggins stuff where, okay, you can hold out hope that he's more consistent and just better overall. We have nearly a decade of evidence that says 2022 postseason Andrew Wiggins is the exception, not the rule. And so if you're the Warriors, you need to be eyeing the trade market if you are actually concerned about optimizing what's left of Steph's window. Again, this would be so much easier just to ride out, let them fade off into the sunset if Steph wasn't this transformative MVP type of player. He still is, though, and so to me, you're obligated, and we've said this multiple times on this podcast. I've said it. I've written about it, and the Warriors just have never done it, and they were kind of vindicated to some extent when they won another title, but after seeing last year, spending it in mediocrity, you're doing the same again. Real changes need to be made if you actually want to make the most of Steph Curry's prime. Houston Rockets, I don't feel good about this one either. I hate putting teams that are plucky. They're above 500 right now as I'm recording this. 39-43 feels right, though. There's nothing, you look at this team's performance to date, there's nothing that feels too fluky. The defense feels real. They're top 5 in points allowed per possession right now. They've gotten some, opponents are not shooting like ultra high clips from the 3-point line for them. But when you watch them, when you watch Dylan Brooks, when you watch Fred VanVleet, when you watch Jabari Smith Jr., when you even watch Alperen Sengun, Tari Eason, Jason Tate, there's a real defensive system here, or a lot of real defensive talent that could be effective. The offense can have its highs as well, does explore some valleys. My question with them, I mean, I have a multitude of questions for them, but the two primary ones are, can Alperen Sengun play like this for an entire year? It's not that I don't believe in his talent. He's shouldering his biggest load ever, and now we're going to extrapolate that across an entire 82-game season. Could they fade a little bit? And then what happens when Amen Thompson returns? He has to, I would assume he factors prominently into the rotation. When you're going to lean on a rookie to that degree, it lends itself to growing pains, and that could hurt them in the immediate. And there is a chance the Rockets look to the trade market to improve upon just being sort of in the bottom of the middle, however you want to phrase it. Their pick is owed to Oklahoma City this year, top 4 protection, I believe. But like, is it really the time? Are you going to go after a bigger name? What bigger name that's become available actually interests you? Is it you're going to be in on Siakam? OG Anunoby fits anywhere, but it doesn't feel like he's available. Would you be in on Brandon Ingram or Zion Williamson? Zion Williamson is such a weird fit here now. Would you be in on Zion if the Pelicans decide to make a move there? I don't know. And so I don't see them getting noticeably better at the trade deadline. Some of the backup big minutes, they could stand to rely on Jabari to run even more backup 5 minutes. There's some awkwardness there, but this team, they're interesting. I just don't know that they're good enough to do anything else other than hover around play-in territory. If they finish at 500, I won't be surprised. If they're above 500, I will be a little surprised. The Indiana Pacers, NBA Cup runner-ups, their offense is it's thermonuclear. It's fast, devastating, versatile, fast again. It's efficient. They have the best half-court offense, which is a big deal because they were 23rd in that metric last year. You can worry about the defense. I'm worried about the defense. Aside from Aaron Nesmith, they don't really have the size to rumble with these bigger wings. You're looking at Bruce Brown, T.J. McConnell, Andrew Nembhard. All those guys are undersized. Miles Turner looks overtaxed on the defensive end. I feel like sometimes it starts to impact him adversely on the offensive end as well. But you just look at what Indiana is doing, and for the regular season specifically, a team that can run and is in the shape to do this all season. And there are a lot of holdovers from last season. And so if you're worried about, will Obi Toppin be in good enough shape he's just a shot of adrenaline to begin with. But if you're worried about Bruce Brown being in enough shape to play at warp speed all year, these aren't the types of players I worry about, but most of this Indiana team, so much of the core was there last year, they're going to be in shape to play this way all season. And so I think that they're going to be a 47-win team. That just feels right. You told me they get to 50, I wouldn't be shocked. I do think the defense is going to hurt them there. They are built to make a trade if they want to. They have Benedict Mathurin, they have Jarris Walker, they own all their first. I just don't know what the answer is. I really do like Pascal Siakam here, having the defense of him and Miles Turner. He can do some of the elite wing defensive stuff, but he's more of a big, and so that's a little awkward how much you give up for him. And then he's another player who's used to working on the ball, and things have been fickle in Toronto because they have him sort of ceding touches and status to Scotty Barnes. Would it be the same way in Indy? There's a lot better spacing there, so he can attack very quickly off the catch and have more room to do so. I don't know if that's the answer. They're another team where it's, throw OG Anunoby, but could they get a Dorian Finney-Smith would make a difference. A Jae'Sean Tate would make a difference. That's the prototype of player that they should really be after, but they're a playoff team as constructed. I don't know what to do with the Clippers. They've come on lately. The lineup, and look, Tyler's done a good job, I think, of exploring more certain lineups. PJ Tucker has gotten 5 straight DNPs, I believe, and that's good, but it's also bad in the sense that, well, you want someone who could fill the minutes he was taking and can play alongside another big. They don't really have that right now unless you're going to downsize to the Harden, George, Leonard, Mann combo alongside Zubats, and that lineup is absolutely annihilating opponents right now. They've been unable to find any sort of lineup with Harden and Russell Westbrook where it works. That will be something to monitor. Part of my primary concern is, as I'm recording this, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard have played in every game. And so to be hovering around 500 when you've gotten that availability, and when their track record suggests that this pristine availability is operating on borrowed time, it's just a little uneasy. The Clippers, to begin with this season, were both combustible and tantalizing. The James Harden trade essentially made them more of both. They are more combustible, but they're also more tantalizing. They do have some of the assets to go out and make a trade. I don't necessarily know what they need. Probably sort of a PJ Tucker type. Is there someone they could get to stretch the floor at the 5, but can also spend time if they want to play with Plumlee or Tice or Zubats? That might be something to look at. Or they just could skew wing altogether, like kind of a wing defender to help with some of the combinations where they are a little bit more undersized. Norman Powell has become mission critical to this team. I think the Clippers are going to be really good, and I can see 45 and 37 being too low on them. But again, they've gotten here, and the post-James Harden trade, lose your first 5, they've looked a lot better since. So we need to recognize that. You have to doubt the durability of their top 2 stars, but even a Harden or a Westbrook, is something going to creep up at all this season? And that's just where I'm at. You have to pull wins from somewhere, but the Clippers, they have a much higher ceiling than 45 wins. The Lakers, I'm going to have at 50 wins. The NBA Cup winners, you can't call it I guess they are the NBA in-season tournament winners. They look, as they've gotten healthier, they've looked a lot better. LeBron James looks spectacular, quite frankly. The minutes without him are still a disaster. That's going to help him in the MVP discussion. Anthony Davis is building a Defensive Player of the Year discussion game by game here. D'Angelo Russell's put together like decidedly 2-way performances, which is just weird to watch, and it complicates when you start to come up with trades to improve their offense. It's, well, does it make sense? Zach LaVine's a name that comes up. Does it make sense to give up D'Lo and Rui Hachimura and other stuff to get Zach LaVine when D'Angelo Russell's been playing the way he's playing? I don't know. I don't know that it does. And so you do have to think about that. The fact that you are thinking about that, was a good spot for the Lakers to be in. The question as ever, look, this team, I know what they've done at points or what they did at points in the midseason tournament. There's not enough shooting in terms of efficiency or volume from the perimeter. They need to address that. Taurean Prince coming on a little bit will help. Max Christie's given them some good minutes. Cam Reddish has been really good defensively. Will Gabe Vincent come back and maybe jack up their 3-point volume and efficiency? His 3-point clips have traditionally been all over the place, so you don't know. I'd like to see them acquire a shooter that could crack their closing lineup, to be honest with you, because I look at it as very open-ended. I know a lot of people want to pencil D'Lo in there or Rui in there. D'Lo understands he's not always going to close games. I think Reeves, LeBron, and AD are kind of your 3 guaranteed spots to close games. Can you get a shooter to add to that trio that you know is going to close games for you? And if you can, the Lakers become a real threat. And then, of course, they'll be great so long as LeBron and AD are healthy, but neither of those guys have played in 60 games or more since 2018, 2019. The Memphis Grizzlies, 33 and 49 feels right. It's incredibly low, but they're on pace to win a lot less than that. They're dealing with, in addition, look, Ja Morant's coming back soon from his 25-game suspension. They're dealing with a bevy of other stuff. Marcus Smart is out right now. Luke Kennard's only played in 8 games while dealing with some knee problems, which knee problems have been an issue in his past. That's something to keep an eye on. Neither Steven Adams nor Brandon Clark are expected to play this season. That's a big deal. I don't know what you're going to hope for from this Memphis team. They're 5 games in the loss column behind the final playing spot. A quarter of the way through the season, that's a pretty big gap to bridge, and I don't expect them to do it. This isn't, they need to blow it up now, but the season feels like a wash, and they're going to need to recalibrate over the offseason. And I personally wouldn't, if it's a small-time trade and we're going to get Andre Drummond to come in here and try and replicate a lot of what Steven Adams did for you, okay, fine. But I wouldn't be in the business of, we need to make another trade to kind of advance our agenda this season, because it just doesn't matter. To what end are you doing that? To get the 9th spot in the play-in tournament, maybe back your way into a first-round exit? I'm not about it. I will be interested to see how they're playing once Ja returns, but this season, frankly, this season's over for them. It's over. They've ceded too much ground, and it's not entirely their fault. The Miami Heat, I'm going to go with 47 just because they're the Miami Heat, and I'm not going to doubt their ability to figure it out. We got to a point, they gave up Max Strus and Gabe Vincent, let them leave for nothing, and it doesn't fucking matter because the dribbling version of Duncan Robinson is real, and Jaime Jaquez has come in, and even before he was hitting threes, was leaving a two-way dent, and now he's hitting threes on top of that. They are dead last in opponent percentage at the rim. They don't allow a ton of attempts there, but to be 30th is pretty big deal for them. I think it speaks to just how small. Bam has never been a true rim protector, and they skew small overall. And if you're going to play bigger, you're going to have a defensive liability on the court. Does a healthier Caleb Martin allow wings, forwards like Jaquez, like Jimmy Butler to pitch in more down low? That's something to monitor. Or do you need to address that a little bit more? Tyler Hero's going to come back. That will, in theory, help your offense, gives you, the additional playmaking. I don't know if he's an underrated passer, but he's a quality passer enough, and so you can use those minutes with him and Kyle Lowry and Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. You have your passing down. But if you get to a point where you're trading Tyler Hero or Kyle Lowry, you are probably going to need to bring in some additional playmaking. And shout out to Bam here as well. He's putting together yet another career offensive season, and I think that's going to put him firmly in not just the conversation, but firmly on an all-NBA team for the first time in his career. But I'm just over it. Look, the Heat's defense has been a little weird. Some of that is opponents have been shooting well from the perimeter against them, and you wouldn't expect all those percentages to hold. Relative to their reputation, though, that is something to watch for. They're just going to spit out 45-7 wins. What are we even doing here? You just have to. I'm over doubting the Heat. Like we said, there's alien shit going on in there. They're going to upend the postseason landscape at some point. Milwaukee Bucks, everyone's concerned about the Bucks, and I get it. The defense is not great. No team allows opponents to get out and transition more often after live rebounds than Milwaukee. It's not just a matter of teams getting behind their guards. There's a lot of just watching and letting things happen from Brook Lopez and even Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know that they're going to solve these issues, these defensive issues, with the personnel that's on their roster necessarily. We've seen Bobby Portis' minutes come down. We should note that both Pat Connaughton and Jay Crowder are injured. They're still on this 56 win pace, which is what I have them for, 56 and 26. They're just going to be fine. I mean, the offense is top 5, and they're not even milking the Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo pick and roll enough. Is it concerning that there's been some rough late game execution? Bobby Portis called it out from Adrian Griffin and the players the other day. It's slightly concerning, but the Bucks still have a top 5 crunch time offense. And so the fact that they haven't even reached their peak, their rim protection has gotten a lot better since Brook Lopez started playing more drop, unless he's going up against Indiana. So for all that's wrong with them, they're still just on pace for this elite record. I think the concerns are going to manifest more in the postseason, and it's, can you get some additional point of attack defense in here, or just maybe a different look on the wings? I will say I've been really impressed with, for the most part, what Malik Beasley has done on both ends of the floor this season. Probably not enough defensively, but he's had games where he's played really well defensively. The Minnesota Timberwolves, 58-24, because fuck it, this team is real. If I have to choose right now, and I've already chosen in the preseason, but if I have to choose, I'm going to pick the Nuggets to come out of the West. After that, though, and we've had this conversation before, it's supposed to be entirely open-ended. It's not, because the Timberwolves exist, and this team is just so good. When you look at the top 8, 9 of their rotation, depending on how you feel about Troy Brown Jr., that is superseded by no other team in the league, 1 through 8 or 9. There might be deeper teams overall, looking at New Orleans and all their optionality, OKC, of course, but 1 through 8, 9, the Wolves have maybe the most bankable playoff rotation right now. Naz Reid has made another jump at both ends of the floor. I still need to see this offense take more threes, and I think that's important because the dual big setup, while it's been effective, especially on defense, it has created an environment where it's harder for the perimeter players to get to the rim, and so the Wolves are not as often, and those tighter spaces at points have resulted in some additional turnovers, and three-point shooting can be a way of offsetting that. I'm not saying camp Karl-Anthony Towns out in the corner and have him take 10 threes a game, but Karl-Anthony Towns take 10 threes a game at this point. Karl-Anthony Towns has been good, though. Some variance on offense, and then he's defended really well. Still slow in space, but when you look at what he's doing specifically, just like where he's supposed to be, he's now there, and it's not just there and he's off balance and he's late. It helps that you're playing with Naz Reid and Rudy Gobert, who probably needs to be the defensive player of the year right now. You go back and look at just 5 to 7 defensive possessions from the Wolves per game. He is all over the place. I said I haven't seen him move like this in years. I think it was JJ Redick or Zach Lowe had recently said, and they're just probably right because it's them, that he's never moved like this ever. They have the best defense in the league. It's not going anywhere. I think because you look at their second best defender, we know where their second best defender is, but when you look at who Rudy Gobert's played next to on the perimeter, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, probably Nickeil Alexander-Walker, probably Troy Brown Jr., all would have registered as the best perimeter defender during Gobert's final season in Utah if they were on that team. So to have all this personnel around, I think it's worth the offensive trade-off because you have decided when you're looking at some of the guys you are playing, Troy Brown Jr., Kyle Anderson even, you have decided that your three-point attempt rate may always be artificially or by design repressed. And I'm watching this team and it's just okay. I'd like to see them. I don't think it's a matter of them needing to acquire someone. I think you look at Towns, you can even see it from Jaden McDaniels, Anthony Edwards, whose pull-up three-pointer has been going in this year. Can they up their three-point volume? Because I think that would do wonders for the offense. But they're 58. They're on course, I think, for maybe 60-something at this point. We're going to pull them back a little bit, but this is probably going to be the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, quite frankly. I will be interested to see. My question with the Wolves is whether any of the matchup stuff changes in the postseason. Is that when teams are scheming for you, when they're going up against you potentially 7 times in a row, does that make it harder to float the too big stuff? This might be a hot take. I think it will wind up impacting Karl-Anthony Towns more than anyone because he might be more exploitable on defense than, or not might be, he is more than a Naz Reid or a Gobert. And I think you could get by defensively with those two on the court together in Reid and Gobert in a playoff series because of just how damn switchable Naz Reid is. The New Orleans Pelicans, I'm going 45 wins. It's ambitious. You will be hard-pressed to find someone who is higher on this exact version, no changes of the Pelicans, than me. I have vacillated. We've made jokes in Discord about it. Jokes been made on Twitter about it. I was almost ready to deboard the bandwagon at one point. They're getting healthier. You can see the skeleton of a really great team here. Trey Murphy III's return is absolutely monstrous because I think it will allow them to get to more of those Zion as your big units with Herb Jones so that you can, and maybe even Dyson Daniels, so that he's not the one playing the center role specifically, but Zion load big units that don't torpedo your defense. I think still when you watch this team, there's some things, plural, missing, and no one in themselves is the primary issue. I will say Zion's rebounding and conditioning is clearly an issue. There's the report from Christian Clark of the Times-Picayune, I think, or NOLA.com about how the Pelicans have struggled to get Zion to change his diet and work on his conditioning. That's definitely something to monitor. I find it tough to be too critical of someone in Zion's spot who can't necessarily get his conditioning. He's 23 is my point. And just like, how dedicated were you to nutrition when you're 23? You weren't getting paid this much money, but you do have to remember they're dealing with a 23-year-old. However, his defensive rebounding rate is 8.65 when Jonas Valanciunas is off the floor and when Cody Zeller is off the floor. So effectively, sometimes Nance is there, but when he is a primary big, that is impressively shitty. I have to say it. That's something to be a concern. I look at them and it's Jonas Valanciunas is not the problem, and I'm not going to say Larry Nance Jr. is the problem either, but they could use a different big look next to Zion, someone who's going to protect the rim, set really powerful screens. That player, and I believe we've talked about this on the podcast, doesn't necessarily need to be a floor spacer. One, because it's hard to find those guys, but two, if you could find that guy, definitely go out and get him. But if you can just get someone to create separation with screens, that will be a form of spacing and gravity in itself. And Zion doesn't need a ton of room to get to the basket. He has been lighter on freakish athletic plays this year, and he can still just devastate defenses and get through double, triple, quadruple teams. With that said, I do think the Pelicans really do need to improve their floor balance overall still, even if you're going to, even with Trey Murphy being back. I don't know if I'm looking at this roster without any changes. I think there's the one big stuff, but the other thing you could try is, can we get Zion to set more super high ball screens for Brandon Ingram or CJ McCollum so they can dribble into threes that are going to be 25 feet and above the break, and then that gives Zion room to kind of roam underneath them after setting the screen. Is it a matter, though, of going out and getting a trade? The more I've thought about it, I love OG Anunoby for this team because of what he could do in the Zion as your big lineups. You have him. You put Herb on ball a little bit more if you want, if you're worried about, maybe run some pick and rolls with him and Zion. But having Herb and OG specifically, that's going to insulate you defensively against basically any big man unit. And you get the benefits of, all right, so throw Ingram and Trey Murphy there, and there's just your spacing, and you devastate. I do think for the Pelicans to actualize the contender version of themselves, they will need to make a trade. But they are closer than I think some of their low moments might suggest. The New York Knicks, I don't know what to do with them. I'm putting them at 47 wins, which is what they had last year. I think some fans will take that as an insult because they're on pace to win about 50 right now. It's not an insult. I mean, we have to consider the shifting landscape in the East for one. Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, not going anywhere. Orlando and Indy, neither of them look like they're going anywhere right now, and at least one of them seems like they're here to stay. And then you kind of have to believe Miami and or Cleveland will both climb up the ranks. And so the Knicks have been really bad against winning opponents this year. I think they're 3-9 in those games. They're a really good team overall, though. And I should do a longer podcast on this, but it's the middle of the season, and I don't want to dedicate way too much time to one team. I really like what they've done. Even look, the Quentin Grimes struggles. They move him to the bench. Dante DiVincenzo starting. What does that do to the defense because of how important Quentin Grimes was to defending on the perimeter? RJ's been better there this year, but this leads into my difficulty. There's just weirdness. The stuff that I can buy into. The defense I buy into. Mitchell Robinson has been great. Some of the on-off splits can be wonky, but you have to look at the way that he's just deterring teams from. It's not just, the rim volume can be a little bit higher, but he's just taking away floaters because they're terrified of him. And he's also being pulled away from the basket a bunch. I think the best way to look at this, stuff I like about the Knicks, I think the defense is real. Stuff I don't like, it doesn't seem like they can defend teams that stretch the floor, like across all 5 spots or even 4 spots. That's a real problem. The offense, taking enough threes and hitting them at a high clip, I would still like to see them take more threes. Jalen Brunson's emergence as one of the deadliest off-the-dribble three-point shooters in the league, absolutely real. Julius Randle playing better lately, maybe real. But the inconsistency from him and now RJ Barrett coming back from his migraine stuff, and even Josh Hart, him and Grimes, they're talking about how hard it is to get in the flow of this offense because they're so deep. And neither of those two are. Grimes, I think, could play an offense like Dante DiVincenzo. Josh Hart isn't really wired to do that, but he can also go grab a rebound and then dribble it up the court. That's how you can generate your own offense. It feels like they're too deep for their own good, and you run into some awkwardness. And the other issue here is, how do you get to the next step with this roster? Where is the internal leap coming from? I don't know that Emmanuel Quickley is going to be much better. Quentin Grimes is currently in a slump and has been demoted. I just think that RJ Barrett is going to be a roller coaster for his career. Felt like he turned a corner as just a decision maker. There have been some of those moments since he's come back from the migraine issue, but not nearly as many. And I'm not insulting the Knicks in the sense that they need to make a trade or that they're doomed. It's just, this is weird. They're good. The path to them with this exact roster being a lot better and being a threat to come out of the East, a true blue threat. I don't know how they get there, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend I know how they get there with a trade. The names that are available, Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, even OG Anunoby is the guy, but he's the guy for every team, and I don't think the Raptors move him. I think they need the bigger wing type. Doesn't need to have ball skills, but will defend their butts off and is going to hit and take a bunch of open threes. In OG Anunoby type, I don't know that there's a lower end version of that that's going to become available to the Knicks. Still a really good team. I just question whether they have a peak above 47 wins, maybe winning one playoff series. If the indicators are there, their defense remains elite, and they continue to hover in the top 10 of offenses as well, I'll recalibrate at the halfway point. But something still feels off here. And again, it's not in a bad way. It's like I said, they might be too deep for their own good. You could, if you would like to, restrain yourself when talking about the Thunder. Sam Presti would certainly like you to. I'm done. This team, they have not just arrived. They've unpacked, they've changed the locks, and they've settled into their new spot, new digs atop the Western Conference, near the top of the Western Conference. I won't say they're beyond concern because I have not many, but a few. Will Chet Holmgren hit a rookie wall? Like, this is just his first time going through an 82-game season. The Josh Giddey play, guys, admit it, it's been a drain, and they now have to plan around it. That's going to be an issue. Some of their most important lineups, I think their most important lineups, we're getting to the point where I don't even want to see him in them. Yeah, to start the game, fine. To close the game, no. Other than that, you look at this team, will they be the best three-point shooting team in the league all year? Probably not, and they also need to take more threes. The defensive rebounding and rebounding in general is an issue. Can they acquire more heft on the front line without doing the anti-Thunder thing of, we consolidated into kind of a win-ish now trade? Those are concerns, but this team is great. You don't get inside the top 5 of net rating more than one quarter of the way through the season on accident. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is once again a top 5 MVP candidate, and he's not 4 or 5. There's Jokic, Hallie, and SGA. I think LeBron is the other guy that's going to have a case to be in the top 4. So maybe SGA is 4. I know a lot of people want to see Kevin Durant get there. I'm not lower on his case than most. He could certainly be in my top 5. I haven't gone through it. I don't think he's in the top 3, though. I would have SGA, Hallie, and Jokic all ahead of him, and I'd probably have LeBron ahead of him as well. The Thunder, though, Jalen Williams is now, J-Dub is now an every level scorer. That's what it really feels like. Lou Dort, defending his butt off, has not been playing as well on offense of late, but he's still just Lou fucking Mack truck Dort. And really, look, I can't overemphasize enough how much better he makes a J-Dub or a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander look, or even a Chet Holmgren look defensively, because he insulates everybody against the most difficult assignment. I had someone on Twitter ask me if I thought Shai could make all defense this year. I think his defensive effort will be reflected in the MVP voting, but he's not going to make all defense because he's so insulated on defense when you look at his one-on-one assignment workload, thanks to Lou Dort. Isaiah Joe just continues to do things. Casey Wallace been a great rookie. The fact that he's so plug and play, defends his butt off, will hit open threes, that's a big deal. Aaron Wiggins, shot of adrenaline. I think Jay will start to play a little bit better. I think this team is just, are they a contender? They might be. I'm going to have them at 51 wins. But if they can acquire some heft on the front line and someone who doesn't need to crack their closing lineup, but another front court option that has size and can play alongside Chet Holmgren. And it's hard to find a big who can't play alongside Chet Holmgren because of what he does from the outside. Doesn't change their entire trajectory, but it turns them into a completely different. They're not at that point, they're not a plucky title threat. They're like an actual title threat. I just don't think they'll make that move. And look, they don't need to, because as constructed, they will probably season into a contender eventually. The Orlando Magic, another surprise. We'll go with 48 wins here. I didn't see this. I could have seen a scenario where I think I took the over on the Thunder because of I listened to Sam Presti. I'm a fucking idiot. But the Magic, I could never envision them winning almost 50 games. It's going to happen at this point. I don't know where's the pullback going to come from. You actually might get some boosts. Franz Wagner has not been shooting the ball well from 3. Still been making an impact on offense, though. Paolo Banchero is once again a terror. The defense has remained hellfire for the most part, without, by the way, Markelle Fultz or Wendell Carter Jr. Jonathan Isaac is now dealing with another injury. So as the Magic get healthier, they might get even better on the defensive end. The offense is their problem. It's been better lately. They can do some things in transition. They can get to the foul line. It helps that Paolo Banchero is essentially just murdering everybody as I record this. But they need shooting. And by that, I mean not just someone who's hitting threes, someone who has defenses react like they're going to hit threes. Defenses don't care about guarding any of Orlando shooters at this point. Even when it looks like they're 4 out or 5 out, they don't care about any of Orlando shooters. And so can you get them a shooter that defense is going to care about to make life easier on Franz Wagner, on Paolo Banchero, even on, Markelle Fultz, like once he's back. Would they be willing to make that trade? And I don't think it needs to be a star. Zach LaVine still interests me a little bit for this team. Would they go after Anthony Simons? Would they go after Gary Trent Jr.? That's the level of player that could make a world of difference here. I'll wrap by saying I think Anthony Black is probably going to make like $1 trillion all defense teams for his career. And I'll wrap it up finally by saying Jalen Suggs, I've said this probably too many times. He, to me, has been a lock for all defense. I think he's been one of the 10 best defenders in basketball. And that's on top of kind of just improving on offense, accepting a streamlined, more plug-and-play role. The Philadelphia 76ers are going to win 53 games. I think that's the exact pace they're on now. If you're waiting for the pullback, it's not coming. Tyrese Maxey has inoculated them against it. Forfeiting James Harden's star power matters in a vacuum, but now you've replaced it with more all-NBA caliber star power in Tyrese Maxey. He's averaging like 27 points or 26 points and 7 assists, shooting over 39% on an absurd volume of threes. The Sixers are winning the minutes he plays without Joel Embiid. That's a big deal. Joel Embiid having another MVP-type campaign as well. The passing from him has gotten a lot better, and there's more variance to Philly's offense in general, it feels like. There's been some, I don't want to call it defensive noise, but concern. The Sixers are not good at keeping teams out of transition right now. They get even worse when Joel Embiid is off the floor. I do think this probably has at least a little to a lot to do with Nick Nurse deciding that he wants them to crash the offensive glass, but they could use another ball handler type to help control the ball on offense and then maybe limit the transition opportunities when you're looking at some of the turnovers they've had, or another wing to really, because you look at their best defenders right now are Embiid. Okay, he's not going to defend those wing types. And then you have DeAnthony Melton, and there's Jaden Springer, and Tobias Harris have been solid, but he's cooled off after his Surface of the Sun start. Kelly Oubre Jr. is not going to give you that type of performance on defense. So I'd like to see them go after someone who would. And if you're not, can it be another ball handler type to come off the bench to steady your offense without Maxey on the floor? They're just a ridiculously good team, though, and Maxey's giving them optionality. They don't need to go out and trade for a number 2 now. They don't even need a number 3. You could say, we just want to deepen our rotation, and we're going to move some of these assets to get 2 or 3 guys in here who fill the gaps. I do think they're less likely to go that route and give up first-round equity in the middle of the season. They'll want to wait and see what happens over the offseason with their cap space in the trade market. But, again, Maxey has afforded them all sorts of optionality. The Phoenix Suns, I'm going to go with 50. I know some people probably expect it to be less. 0 minutes have been played by their big 3 together this season. Bradley Beal's still dealing with the back stuff. Devin Booker missed some time. They're still winning. They're 7-4 with KD and Devin Booker this year. That's a better than 50 win pace. And I do truly believe that by getting Bradley Beal back, you're doing 2 things. The turnovers have been an issue even with Devin Booker on the court now. But when it's Booker and Beal and Durant, and now you can have 2 of them on the court at all times, I think the turnovers will start to tamp themselves down. And then you've also removed one wild card from the crunch time rotation. You know that Beal, Durant, and Booker are going to play when they're all there. Now you futz and fiddle around them. Could they be bitten by the fact that they have a bunch of one-way minimum contract guys, or just guys who run hot and cold, including Yusuf Nurkic, he's had some really good moments this year, but there have been nights where it feels like he's just not there at all, or where the defense is terrible. It's actually impressive that the Suns are not a bottom 10 defense at the moment when you look at their personnel and how they had to rely on some of the units. I think backup 5 or 5 spot in general could become an issue come postseason. Are they able to get anyone to help that, or are they going to need to rely on smaller combinations and, hey, Kevin Durant is now your backup 5? I don't know. They have 3 stars, and Bradley Beal will eventually be healthy. It's fair to question what their ceiling is now. I still think, look, Minnesota's right there. This might be the team that's the 3rd most ready to win a title in the West. The Lakers and the Thunder kind of are giving me pause there, but they're certainly in that, like, when I'm talking inner circle contenders right now, and we did this, go check out our podcast on inner circle contenders. I have Minnesota, Denver, Boston, and Milwaukee, and I'd be willing to consider putting Phoenix or the Lakers in there. I don't have them in there just yet, but the Suns are certainly in that next tier if they're not in the inner circle. The Blazers, 17-65. I promise you I have seen some Blazers. I know they're on pace to win more. I know that their their defense has been pretty good. They're 10th in points allowed per possession in the half court. That's a big deal. they should get one. I think they're going to get worse on defense because now you have Anthony Simons and Scoot Henderson back in the fold. But two, I think they'll get worse by design. It's okay. You're going to rely on Scoot Henderson, a rookie. The learning curve for rookie point guards is pretty steep. That's going to hurt you. And then the bigger one is how many of the guys who are helping them are still there after the trade deadline. I'm talking Jeremy Grant, Matisse Thybulle, Anthony Simons himself, Malcolm Brogdon, of course. I think at least two of those guys get traded by the deadline. And I also think that even if they don't, this includes DeAndre Ayton, we're going to start to see injuries to made up body parts and them racking up DNPs, because that's just the point of the rebuild Portland's at. Wouldn't shock me if they won more than this, but I think by the trade deadline, we'll look at this and say, okay, like this team is going to get worse on purpose one way or the other. The Sacramento Kings, I'm going with 46 and 34. Excuse me, it says 35. The issue, 46 and 36 is what it should say. I apologize. The issue here is I don't think they're worse. I just don't know how much better they are. You've gotten defensive jumps from Keegan Murray before his back injuries and De'Aaron Fox. That kind of gets offset by the Harrison Barnes regression and Davion Mitchell just becoming not completely unplayable, but he's just not as big of a part of the rotation. You're also getting hammered in the minutes that Sabonis plays without Fox. Offense is trending in the right direction since Fox's return. That's good. So I still just have questions about this team. The bigger one is the defense, of course. They don't have the ability to be better than a bottom 10 defense to me over the course of a season. They're another team where it's, yes, OG Anunoby would be great, but if you can get a Jayshawn Tate or Dorian Finney-Smith, that would go a long way. San Antonio Spurs, this one's hard because they look so bad on purpose right now. I have them at 19 and 63. I could easily see them going higher just because they have the talent to get better. Wemby's the headliner, of course, there. Does he hit a rookie wall? But like, he's shooting over 40% from three on real volume over his past, I think the past like 2 weeks or something, 9 games, whatever it's been. And at some point you would think, okay, they're gonna start Trey Jones, right? Or get away from Jeremy Sohan playing so much point guard. And they have Zach Collins, they have Devin Vassell, they have Keldon Johnson. They have good players. I would like to see them acquire another floor general type, not Devontae Graham, someone other than Trey Jones. Tyus Jones, speaking of Joneses, would make a lot of sense for this team. I just don't think the Spurs are at that point. And you don't need to be at that point to make a trade for someone like Tyus Jones, but that's just not how they operate. I ultimately think that they're going to continue with the experimentation. Wouldn't surprise me if they get a little extra cautious with Wemby when we get to the second half of the season. 19 and 63, I feel uneasy about that, but we haven't seen extended stretches of the Spurs playing a brand of basketball that makes you think they are going to be more of a threat in the Western Conference, or I should say more of a threat to not finish with one of the two worst records in the Western Conference. The Toronto Raptors, 35 and 47. What do I say about the Raptors? Scotty Barnes' year 3 leap is for real, and it gives the Raptors access to a multitude of directions. Pick one. Pick one. You've not optimized the roster if you want to keep Siakam and Barnes and Anunoby together. There's just not enough spacing. Their half-court offense has been more efficient overall than I would have expected, but they still struggle to open it up. Everything just feels like not everything, but so much of what they do when it's effective feels like it's too hard and that it should be easier. That is with, mind you, Dennis Schroeder and Scotty Barnes shooting better from three than I think anyone could have predicted. There are not any more levers to pull with this exact roster. You could hope Grady Dick kind of starts shooting a lot better. You could move Gary Trent Jr. into the starting 5. That's really it. And so if you are the Raptors and you want to be better than 35 and 47, then you need to go out and be involved in the Zach LaVine sweepstakes. If you want to be not trapped in the bottom of the middle, then you need to trade, I would say, Siakam and Gary Trent Jr. in advance of free agency, because there's been this conversation in our Discord. I think it was Everything Blacks proposed it. They're not sure what's worse, letting Siakam and Gary Trent Jr. leave in free agency for nothing, or just running back this entire roster. And it's a fair point. Pick a direction. You have Scotty Barnes. You know you need to flesh everything out around him. I do think there's a pathway to him and Siakam working, but you need to assemble a roster that opens that pathway to it working. They haven't done that. Will they do that? Masai Ujiri's been kind of cagey when it comes to blockbuster trades since the Kawhi Leonard deal. I know that they traded Jakob Poeltl in the Kawhi Leonard deal. That's the blockbuster I'm talking about. I know they went out and got Marc Gasol later on that year. That wasn't really a blockbuster. And since then, their biggest move has been on the trade market has been bringing back Jakob Poeltl for a top 6 protected first round pick. You have the equity to go out and be involved in some pretty splashy transactions depending on who becomes available. I like Zach LaVine in Toronto. I'm sure Toronto doesn't. He's just not that type of player. But if there's nothing wrong with that, the right foot stuff he's dealing with, I know he had the PRP injection. If that's not a long-term thing, he makes so much sense for this team. If you don't want to go that route, I get it. Then it's time to trade Siakam and probably Trent. I would keep Anunoby. He just makes too much sense to me alongside Barnes. Utah Jazz, I'm going to go 29-53. I think we're seeing this season what everyone mistakenly thought we were going to see from the jump last season, and that's the Jazz are at a talent deficit, and it's now showing. Injuries to Walker Kessler, Larry Markkinen, the hamstring stuff right now certainly haven't helped. Jordan Clarkson's thigh stuff, that's now diluted a playmaking well that really only has Keontae George aside from Jordan Clarkson. This team does have the assets to say, well, maybe we'll go out and get more passing or actual wings, and actual wings who will defend without maybe shrinking the floor on the offensive end. I expect them to tilt more towards sellers than opportunistic buyers, which is what they were with John Collins, were these opportunistic buyers. I do expect that they're more likely, I would frame it this way, and I'm not going to predict it. I think it's more likely Larry Markkinen, because he's going to be extension eligible, because they're going to start thinking about his next deal, because he's a fringe All-NBA player and not necessarily a caps lock building block for the future. I think there's a better chance he becomes this year's surprise trade candidate than the Jazz go out and make a move that addresses the playmaking uncertainty aside from George, or just the complete absence of wings on this roster, and wings that can also kind of diversify how you're running the front line right now, where you're kind of locked into, well, we're playing, it's not 3-4s because Larry Markkinen can play the 3, but it's like, oh, we don't really have room or the tools to get Lowry to the 4 a bunch. And is John Collins best suited if he's playing alongside another big? Is there any way to open up minutes for Taylor Hendricks and all this? That's not really related to the Jazz changing up the way that they build the roster, but I'd like to see more of Taylor Hendricks. I do think we get to a point where we do see that. And so that will deflate their win total. And there are players on this team, not necessarily Markkinen, but that you could see them moving that then actively hurt their immediate chances. I would say Walker Kessler and Larry Markkinen are the players least likely to be traded, which is just weird because you could tell me that Larry Markkinen gets traded over Taylor Horton Tucker because there's more of a demand and the Jazz have decided to go that route. They're here because if they make monumental changes, it's not going to be to materially improve the roster this season. Our final team, the good old Washington Wizards, who are not good. We'll go 15-67. They're actually on pace right now to win only 12. That's me going to 15 almost feels bold because they're built to lose and play no defense. And what is their pathway to getting better than this 12-win pace? When you look at some of the players on this team, Jordan Poole will be there past the trade deadline. Will Kyle Kuzma? Will Corey Kispert? Denny Avdia, poison pill, I think he'll be there past the trade deadline. Will Tyus Jones? Would a healthy DeLon Wright? Will Daniel Gafford? And so I could see them starting to move players to make themselves even worse, which would mean that 15 is pretty ambitious. I will say, I just think when we get to late in the season and you're dealing with teams who start to initiate their own inorganic tanks or just good teams that have entered cruise control, the Wizards will pick up a few extra victories there, even after they move. At least one of Kuzma and Tyus Jones. We'll limit it to that. I think at least one of those guys will be gone. I'll be floored if they're both still on the roster past the trade deadline. Bright spots, though, for this team, Denny Avdia, Bilal Coulibaly, Corey Kispert, I think those have been bright spots. Landry Shamet, before was he dealing with a neck injury? I think he had some really good moments for them before that. The Bilal Coulibaly one, he just looks more ready, especially on offense, than he was supposed to be. And I would like to see the Wizards commit to really ratcheting up his front court touches for the rest of the year. Most certainly that would be a a vote of not a vote of confidence, but that would be one of the primary reasons to move Kuzma, maybe even Jones, maybe even scale back on Jordan Poole's role so that you can open up more touches in the front court for Bilal Coulibaly, which are still like, I think he's outside the top 5 in the team on those. And that's just not the way to go, quite frankly. I want to see more Bilal Coulibaly on ball and then the information that comes with it. Hope you enjoyed this. Please remember to subscribe if you haven't already. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, hit the subscribe button. And please, I would ask that you tell people or share our content with other people to help us continue building the community, which is getting harder and harder as Twitter progressively just sucks. Now, we appreciate all the support. Join our Discord. Come continue the conversation with me, with us. Get your mailbag questions in there. Always a blast. Socials, they're in the podcast and YouTube descriptions. Until next time, and as always, I leave you with a shout out to the one, the only, Frank Ntilikina, and my sincerest apologies once again, and perhaps forevermore, to Reggie Jackson.